What if I told you God is whispering something to you right now? Not a warning, not a command, but something unexpected, something that could change how you see your entire life. You've walked through storms, you've waited in silence, you've questioned your worth, and still, He says, I'm truly happy with you. In the next few minutes, you're going to hear a message that might feel like it was written just for your soul. Stay with me, this isn't a sermon, it's a story. One that might just mirror your own and reveal something beautiful you didn't know was still possible. You almost didn't hear it, not because it wasn't speaking, but because the world was too loud. Too many screens blinking, too many deadlines pressing, too many opinions pouring into your mind like rain on a tin roof. Somewhere between the texts, the scrolling, the emails, the expectations, and the invisible ache in your chest, it was there. A whisper, not a warning, not a rebuke. A quiet sentence that didn't flash like lightning or shake the ground. Just a soft statement you almost missed. I'm happy with you. It doesn't sound like much at first. Not when your inner critic screams louder. Not when shame has a seat at your table. Not when you've measured your worth by your achievements and still feel like you're coming up short. It's easy to dismiss a whisper when your mind expects thunder. But that sentence, that whisper, could change everything. Because it didn't come from the world. It didn't come from your tired brain. It came from the same voice that spoke galaxies into place. The same voice that shaped oceans and whispered stars into motion. That voice spoke over your life not with disappointment, not with anger, but with joy, with pride, with presence. God says, I'm truly happy with you. Can you even believe that most of us can't? We've been wired to think we must earn every ounce of approval. That love is a wage, not a gift. That God is watching from a distance, arms crossed, waiting for us to finally get it right. We imagine Him with a clipboard, not a heart. But that's not the voice that spoke over you today. This is the voice you almost missed. And you need to hear why. Because behind those 6 words, I'm happy with you, lies a love that defies logic, timing, and performance. It's not based on what you did this week. Not determined by your mood, your paycheck, your follower count, or your spiritual resume. It's based on something far deeper, something older, something eternal. He sees your steps, even the ones no one claps for. He noticed the time you gave without being thanked. The moment you stayed silent when anger begged you to shout. The night you sat in darkness but still whispered, I trust you. He saw that. Not just the action, but the weight it carried. And He smiled. Because in a world that praises loud victories, He honors quiet obedience. You've been walking under the impression that your life must shout to be noticed, that your faith must go viral to be real. But what if heaven celebrates your silent yes more than the world celebrates your public success? God's voice isn't like the others. He's not waiting for you to fix everything before speaking. He's already speaking now in your mess, in your confusion, in your questions. And His first word isn't a command, it's a comfort. Pause. Sit with that. Breathe into that space. Because right now, while you're hearing these words, He's drawing close. And not to tell you what's wrong, but to remind you what's right. Not everything is broken. Not everything is falling apart. Some parts of your life may be the ones you least notice are thriving. That slow forgiveness, growth. That tiny act of courage, breakthrough. That softening heart, a miracle in motion. He's been watching all along, even when you thought He was silent. Even when you assumed He left, He didn't. The silence wasn't absence, it was intimacy. He was closer than breath, whispering truths you weren't quite ready to hear. Until now. Now He speaks with clarity. I'm proud of you. Can you feel the weight of that? How it cuts through every accusation, every insult, every self-doubt. That one sentence from the only voice that truly knows your soul has the power to dismantle every lie you believed about your worth. But here's the mystery. Most people miss it. They miss it because they think God only speaks through thunder, through preachers, through dramatic moments or impossible miracles. But often He speaks through the mundane, through the small, through the quiet. The laundry you folded for a sick friend, that was holy. The phone call you answered even when you were tired, that mattered. The prayer you whispered with shaky faith, it moved heaven. You don't have to wait for a mountaintop to meet God. He's already at your kitchen sink, in your commute, in your late night questions, and right now in these words, He's reaching again. But why is this message so hard to believe? Because we've been conditioned to believe we must earn divine affection, that God only smiles after we've sacrificed enough, prayed enough, improved enough. But what if I told you he was already smiling when you were weeping, that he was already pleased even while you were still searching? That's the heart shock most people never recover from, the realization that God is happy with them before they change. That joy is not the reward of perfection, but the companion of presence. He's with you, and his joy over you is not shallow. It's not because you're always positive. It's not because you've figured life out. It's because he sees the full story. Every past chapter, every current tension, every future triumph. He knows what's coming, and he's excited about it because you're walking toward it step by step, even when you feel lost. Your journey has not gone unnoticed. He remembers the nights you prayed with nothing left to say. He watched as you fought to forgive someone who didn't apologize. He heard the sighs, the laughter, the silence. All of it, not just the big moments, is sacred to him. And now he says, give me 1 minute, just one. Not because he needs it, but because you do. Because in that 1 minute, he'll speak louder than 1,000 distractions. He'll show you what you've been too busy to notice, that you are already walking in grace. Already a light in places you thought were too dark. Already bringing warmth to souls you didn't even know you touched. He just wants to say it to your face. I'm happy with you. And if you give him that minute, he'll say more. He'll remind you of the strength you've built in secret, the beauty he sees that others overlook, the mission he's weaving through your ordinary days. Will you let him? Will you pause, close your eyes, and breathe just to listen? The voice you almost missed is speaking now, and it has one goal: to remind you that you are not just surviving. You are becoming someone God delights in, becoming someone he's proud to walk with, becoming a person of depth, of kindness, of quiet strength. You've spent too much of your life waiting for the world to approve what God already affirms. Now is the time to flip the script, to tune in, to believe. God doesn't speak these words casually. He speaks them like a banner over your life, like a song that plays in the background of every step you take, a refrain that returns every time you feel lost. You are loved, you are seen, you are not a mistake. And most shockingly of all, God is truly, joyfully, unshakably happy with you. Not the future version of you, not the cleaned up version of you. You right now sitting there with doubts and questions and hopes and tears. That version. He chose to speak now for a reason, because maybe you've been waiting for something external to prove you matter. A promotion, a breakthrough, a relationship, a sign. But what if this moment is the sign? The whisper is clear. You're doing better than you think. You're growing in ways you can't see, and you're carrying light you don't even recognize. And God, he's watching, smiling, whispering again, I'm happy with you. Now ask yourself, how different would your life look if you truly believe that? Would you walk lighter, speak bolder, love deeper? The voice you almost missed is asking you not to miss this moment, to let his words settle where the lies used to live, to make space for joy where shame once stood, to rewrite the story you've been telling yourself because the author just handed you a better version. Don't brush it off this time. Lean in, listen, and let the words become real. God is happy with you. There's a small bench tucked beneath an old oak tree at the edge of a quiet field in northern Missouri. Few people know about it, but Sarah does. She discovered it years ago after a season that nearly broke her, a season filled with confusion, disappointment, and that hollow silence where God feels painfully absent. She stumbled onto that bench while running from herself, chasing breath in a body that felt too heavy to carry her grief. And there, under those limbs and rustling leaves, she heard something that would take years to understand. You were made for more than survival. That wasn't a motivational quote carved into wood. It was a whisper in her spirit, soft but clear. And like the voice you read about earlier, the one you almost missed, it came again, not with thunder, but with tenderness. It didn't tell her what to do. It told her who she was. You were designed, not assembled, not thrown together, designed, intentionally, carefully, with detail in mind. Sarah sat for an hour that day, not moving, letting the weight of those words sink in. For the first time in months, she felt something different than exhaustion. It was possibility. That day was the beginning of her understanding something most people never get the courage to believe: your existence isn't random. You were formed on purpose. Every freckle, every scar, every talent, every ache. It all fits into a masterpiece still in the making. God doesn't draft souls like blueprints for mass production. He crafts each life like an artist, with brush in hand, deliberate strokes, subtle layers, unexpected textures. There is no other you. And yet how easily we forget, how quickly we measure ourselves against highlight reels on screens. How often we judge our lives by the number of likes or by whether our dreams have unfolded according to some invisible timeline. How often we compare ourselves to the ones who got it right and wonder if we were made wrong. Comparison is a thief, not just of joy, but of truth. When you compare yourself to someone else, you're silently accusing the Creator of doing a poor job with your life. As if the hands that molded the mountains and painted the seas didn't know how to handle your story. But what if the things you thought disqualified you were actually parts of your design? The anxious temperament that forced you to pray, the loss that opened your heart to compassion, the delay that kept you from running ahead too fast, the strange combination of interests, skills, wounds, and dreams. What if they were all threads in something far more beautiful than you've imagined? The psalmist once wrote, "I am fearfully and wonderfully made." Most of us believe the wonderfully part about others, but struggle to believe it about ourselves. But today, God says something different. He says, "I made you on purpose, for a purpose. Your quirks crafted, your struggles accounted for, your dreams planted." Your life has been shaped not by random events, but by the intentional hand of a God who sees the beginning, the middle, and the end. He knows what you carry. He knows what still confuses you. He knows the broken places and still says it is good. Not because every pain is pleasant, but because every piece has potential. God doesn't waste what you've been through, and He certainly doesn't regret making you. In fact, He celebrates the exact person you are becoming. You don't need to upgrade your personality to earn His favor. You don't need to erase your past to be usable. You don't need to wear a mask of false positivity to qualify for impact. He already knows the real you, and He's already chosen you. Let that settle in. Chosen. Not as an afterthought, not as a backup plan, but as someone who was seen before the world saw light. Your name was spoken in heaven long before anyone ever shouted it in anger. You were called beloved before anyone else called you not enough. You were known by God before you were ever misunderstood by people. Sarah didn't believe this at first. She grew up being told to behave, not to dream, to stay in line, not to ask too many questions. She buried her uniqueness under a shell of sameness, trying to avoid disapproval. But God kept calling her deeper through heartbreak, through long nights, through silent battles she never shared aloud. And now, sitting again on that bench under the oak tree, she doesn't see brokenness anymore. She sees design, a story woven from weakness and wonder. And she knows this: you don't have to understand your whole story yet to trust the author. Maybe that's what God wants to tell you today. You don't need the full map. You just need to believe that your life isn't random, that there's nothing about you He would redo, that your worth isn't up for debate just because your path doesn't look like someone else's. He formed you in secret, which means not everyone will understand you, and that's okay. Divine design often confuses human expectations. Let them misunderstand. Let them mislabel. Their labels don't define your assignment. You are not here to live up to their projections. You're here to live out your design, and your design includes boldness and beauty, yes, but it also includes pain, struggle, seasons where everything feels like it's unraveling. But even in those places, something is forming: character, compassion, wisdom, endurance. You are not only being shaped, you are becoming a shaping force. Through your unique mix of softness and strength, God is reaching people others could never touch. Through your honesty, others are learning to breathe again. Through your story, someone else is discovering that they are not alone. And don't be surprised if God keeps interrupting your plans with something better. Your design doesn't end with what you dreamed at 18. He refines, He updates, He surprises. Just ask anyone who has ever lost something they thought they couldn't live without, and later discovered that their identity was never in that thing to begin with. Purpose evolves. but design remains. And God, the designer, delights in every version of you. He's leading forward not just the finished product, not just the milestone moments. He delights in your messy middle. He dances over your uncertain steps. He weeps with your losses and cheers your recovery. You are not just a body moving through time. You are a soul designed with intention. And when that truth roots itself deep inside, something happens. Confidence replaces comparison. Gratitude replaces envy. Peace replaces striving. And suddenly you stop trying to become someone because you realize you already are someone. Someone made, someone called, someone loved, someone chosen. So today, in the stillness of wherever you are, at your kitchen table, your car, your lunch break, let this truth wrap around you like light. You are designed by hands that do not tremble, by a heart that does not doubt, by a God who speaks not from distance, but from closeness. He is whispering again, not to demand change, but to reveal identity. You've always belonged, not because you fit in, but because you were fashioned to stand out. Now take this next moment and ask yourself quietly, what if everything about me was intentional, even the parts I've tried to hide? If you dared to believe that, how would your tomorrow look different? The storm had rolled in quickly that evening, not from the sky, but from within. Sarah sat in her car just outside the small diner where she worked part-time to make ends meet. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel, not from the cold, but from the fatigue she'd been carrying for months. The weight of trying to hold everything together, the pressure of staying strong, the quiet ache of feeling like she was always on the edge of not being enough. It wasn't just about bills or loneliness or the exhaustion of being misunderstood. It was about the silence that followed her prayers. She had always believed God was near, at least that's what she told herself. But on nights like this, when her heart felt hollow and her world too heavy, belief didn't come easy. She had heard people talk about peace like it was a gentle river running beneath the chaos of life. But to her, peace felt more like a myth. Until that night. As rain began to tap gently against her windshield, a memory surfaced, unexpected and vivid. It was from her childhood, sitting on her grandmother's porch during a thunderstorm in Missouri. The wind had roared and the lightning danced across the fields, but her grandmother had just rocked slowly in her chair and whispered, "Storms don't scare me. I know who still holds the sky." At the time, Sarah had smiled but didn't understand. Now she did. The storm wasn't the enemy. The storm was a mirror. It revealed the places inside her that still didn't trust, the places that still believed her security depended on her effort. And in that fragile moment, soaked in doubt and fatigue, she finally whispered, "I need you to hold me together because I can't anymore." And that's when peace came. Not loud, not sudden, but certain. A stillness that settled not around her, but inside her. A whisper that didn't remove the storm, but redefined it. I never left. It wasn't the answer she expected, but it was the one she needed. Peace isn't always the absence of the storm. Sometimes it's the presence of God within it. Sarah still remembers that night as a turning point, not because her circumstances changed instantly, but because her inner posture did. She learned something she would carry into every future trial. You don't need to escape the storm to find peace. You just need to anchor to the one who speaks through it. That's the mistake most of us make, believing peace is what happens when life finally calms down. When the bank account balances, when the diagnosis reverses, when the tension disappears. But that kind of peace is fragile, conditional, and temporary. God offers something stronger, storm-proof peace. The kind of peace that holds steady even when the wind howls and the waves rise. The kind of peace that lets you sleep in the middle of chaos. The kind of peace that doesn't require circumstances to be perfect, but invites trust in a God who is. Because real peace doesn't start around you, it starts within you. It starts when you stop striving to control every outcome and start surrendering to a God who already sees the end from the beginning. It starts when you let go of your timelines and grip onto His character. It starts when you finally whisper, "Even if this storm doesn't end soon, I'll trust you in it." That's the kind of surrender that shifts atmospheres. That's the kind of surrender Sarah began living with. She stopped expecting ease and started expecting presence. And in return, she found something richer than comfort, confidence. Not in herself, but in God. She began to understand what the old scriptures meant when they said things like, You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you. It wasn't just poetry, it was promise. She started noticing small shifts in her daily life. When a customer at the diner spoke harshly, she didn't carry the insult home like she used to. When her plans fell through, she didn't unravel. And when the quiet moments came, the ones that used to feel like emptiness, she started to recognize them as invitation. That's what peace does. It transforms how you see everything. Pain becomes opportunity for compassion. Waiting becomes a training ground for faith. Loss becomes a classroom for depth. Even silence becomes sacred. And here's what Sarah learned. Perhaps most importantly, peace is not passive. Peace isn't just sitting quietly and hoping things get better. Peace is a decision, a posture, a weapon. It's waking up each day and choosing to root your heart not in your circumstances, but in God's presence. It's whispering you are enough when your paycheck isn't. It's breathing deeply and saying, I trust you when plans fall apart. It's resisting the urge to fix everything and instead asking, what are you trying to teach me here? This kind of peace isn't for the faint of heart. It's forged in fire. It's refined in waiting rooms. It's born in tear-streaked prayers. And it becomes your anchor not because life gets easier, but because God proves himself over and over again. One of Sarah's favorite things now is to sit beneath that old oak tree, the same one from years ago. She still visits the bench regularly. It's not just a place of memory, it's a reminder that storms will come. But peace is always available. She carries a small journal with her, something she calls her storm testimony book. In it, she writes down every moment peace came when it shouldn't have. The time she lost her job and still felt joy. The time her friend walked away and yet love remained. The moments she was most fragile and God was most real. Those testimonies matter because one day someone else will face a storm and they'll need to borrow your peace until they find their own. That's why peace isn't just for you. It's a light, a presence, a force. And when you walk in it, you carry something sacred into every room you enter. So when the world around you spins fast, slow your soul. When voices shout, lean into silence. When fear pounds at the door, remember who stands at your side. God is not intimidated by storms. In fact, he often uses them to reveal what's unshakable, to show you where your trust truly lies, to uncover what can stay and what must go. He's not punishing you with the wind. He's preparing you through it. Because some of the most powerful growth happens when the ground feels unsteady and yet you remain. Peace is what helps you remain. And maybe you're reading this right now from the middle of your own storm. Maybe you don't see a way out. Maybe you're tired of pretending to be strong. Maybe you're wondering if God even notices. He does. And he's whispering again, not a solution, but a presence. I'm with you. I'm not leaving. And I will carry you. That may not change your situation today, but it can change you in it. And that's the beginning of peace. Peace that whispers when you cry. Peace that steadies when you shake. Peace that holds when you want to run. Peace that speaks through the storm, be still and know that I am God. You can't always stop the thunder, but you can stand firm knowing the one who holds the sky still holds you. And in that knowing storms lose their power. In that knowing your soul begins to rest. You may not be able to control what happens next, but you can choose what happens within. So choose peace. Choose to trust again. Choose to believe that storms don't mean abandonment. They often mean preparation. And when the sky clears, you'll look back not with fear, but with awe. Because the storm didn't break you, it built you. The sun was beginning to lower behind the fields just west of Brooklyn Hill, casting golden light through the trees behind the diner where Sarah still worked. Her apron smelled faintly of coffee and syrup, and her feet ached from the double shift she hadn't expected to cover. But as she stepped out the back door and looked toward the horizon, a small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Not because the day had been easy, it hadn't, but because it had meant something. That's what she was learning now. Purpose wasn't always packaged in promotion or applause. Sometimes it looked like showing up. Sometimes it looked like making space for someone else's pain without trying to fix it. Sometimes it meant listening quietly when others only wanted to be heard. Sarah had spent years chasing purpose like it was a far-off destination, a place she'd arrive once she got her life together. She had imagined it as a title, a role, something with a clear beginning and end. But over time, in storms and whispers and silent revelations, God had shown her something different. Purpose wasn't a place, it was a posture. It was how you showed up in ordinary spaces with extraordinary love. It was what happened when your private faith began to echo into public kindness, not forced, not loud, just steady. That's what had started to shift in Sarah. She had stopped searching for a big calling and started saying yes to small moments that stirred her spirit. Like the time she noticed Caleb, the young dishwasher, with bruises on his arms and too many silences in his eyes. She had brought him dinner that night, sat next to him during his break, and just listened. Not because she had answers, but because she had been listened to once, and it had changed everything. Or the time a woman in the booth near the window had burst into tears over a letter she read while stirring her coffee. Sarah had slipped her a napkin and a note. "I don't know what you're going through, but you're not alone." The woman came back 2 weeks later to say thank you. That napkin, she said, was the only kind words she had received that week. Those were the moments Sarah began to see the divine in. Moments when she wasn't trying to impress anyone, but just offering what she had: her presence, her ear, her still growing peace, her soft, steady yes. That's when she realized something else. God doesn't need perfect people to do powerful things. He uses willing ones, and willing doesn't always mean bold. Willing sometimes looks like slow forgiveness, like stepping toward the person who hurt you, not with words but with absence of hate, like choosing not to gossip when everyone else is, like praying for the one who walked away, not out of pride, but with open hands. That's purpose too. In a world that celebrates spotlight, God still honors silence. Not silence born of fear, but of intentionality, the kind of silence that listens before it speaks, that waits before it reacts, that creates space for something more holy than being right, being kind. Sarah had always thought purpose would look like a platform, but now she knew better. Her platform was her presence, her life, just as it was carried weight, because God had woven influence into her ordinary. And that influence wasn't measured by reach, but by depth. She had influence when she prayed in the quiet for people who would never know her name. She had influence when she smiled at strangers on the bus, not out of obligation, but because joy had begun to take root again. She had influence when she cleaned tables at the diner with the same attention she gave to reading scripture. Not because cleaning tables was glamorous, but because everything done in love becomes sacred. This was her calling, not in the abstract, but in the actual, in the daily, in the dirt and dishes and details of everyday life. And the more she embraced this, the more clarity came. Because when you stop performing and start participating, God begins to reveal what He's been building inside you all along. Sarah began writing again, something she hadn't done since college. She started journaling stories from work, reflections from the oak tree bench, prayers whispered in exhaustion. And those words slowly began to form something beautiful. She started posting them on an old blog she almost forgot existed. No photos, no fancy titles. Just her voice, raw, honest, anchored. She didn't expect anyone to read them, but they did. A former co-worker reached out saying she had been quietly struggling and that Sarah's words were the first to feel real in months. A young mother wrote in saying she had saved one post to reread during 3 a.m. feedings. Even a stranger from another state messaged to say the way Sarah described God's soft, present, unforced had helped her finally talk to Him again. Sarah cried when she read that one, not because she felt famous, but because she felt useful. Her words, just like her life, didn't have to be perfect to carry power. And that she now knew was what purpose really meant. Not being praised, being present, not being known widely, being known deeply by the one who made her. It changed how she approached every part of her day. The way she looked people in the eye instead of rushing past. The way she prayed, less about fixing and more about hearing. The way she made space for others to grow, even if it meant staying quiet. Purpose had awakened inside her, not as a task to complete, but as a light to carry. She began calling it activated purpose, because it wasn't dormant anymore. It wasn't locked away, waiting for a better version of herself to emerge. It was alive now, moving in her relationships, stirring in her words, growing in the soil of her surrendered life. And with that activation came a new kind of courage. Not flashy courage, but everyday boldness. The courage to show up at work even when she felt invisible. The courage to ask someone how they really were and wait for the honest answer. The courage to keep believing that her life mattered even when it didn't feel significant. Sarah no longer needed to be convinced she had value. She lived from it. And when you live from value, not for it, everything changes. You stop proving yourself. You start pouring yourself, not to earn, but to serve, not to impress, but to uplift, not to be seen, but to help others feel seen. That's when your influence grows wide, not because you stretch for it, but because your roots go deep. Sarah's story, still unfolding beneath Missouri skies, isn't finished. But purpose now meets her every morning, not in neon lights, but in simple questions. Who can I listen to today? Where can I bring light? What does love look like in this moment? That's how legacies are written, not with headlines, but with humility, not with fame, but with faithfulness. And as Sarah writes each page of her legacy log, her quiet record of small moments that matter, she sees something clearly now. Purpose is not reserved for a few. It's available to all who say yes. Yes to loving, yes to growing, yes to being used even when you feel unusable. Yes to influence that flows not from ego, but from presence. Because presence is power, and the world needs more of it. Purpose often hides in ordinary places. Where do you most feel called to bring your presence? A, in my everyday work and conversations. B, through quiet creativity and encouraging words. Comment A or B below. Your response might just help someone else recognize their own purpose today. The leaves had begun to turn that morning. Sarah stood by the same oak tree that had watched her change over the past years, the one by the bench nestled on the edge of the field behind the diner in Brooklyn Hill. Its branches, once heavy with green, now shimmered gold and crimson. It was a quiet shift, easy to miss if you were rushing. But Sarah wasn't rushing anymore. She had learned the value of stillness, the treasure of being present, the sacredness of letting silence speak. And now, in the hush of autumn air, she came not with questions or even gratitude. She came to listen, because that's where everything had always begun, in the listening. That morning, she brought her journal and a cup of black coffee. No plans, no checklist. Just an open heart and that quiet anticipation she now recognized as God's invitation. She waited. The breeze rustled through the branches, scattering a few leaves into her lap. A dog barked distantly in the town square. And then softly, not audibly, but unmistakably, the whisper returned. I'm still here. 3 words. That's all. But they unlocked something inside her. A memory, a reminder, a promise fulfilled. It was the same whisper that had steadied her through the storm, lit her steps in the dark, and breathed life into her purpose when she thought she had none. And now it was speaking again. Not to start something new, but to carry her deeper. God wasn't finished with her. He never had been. She had assumed once that spiritual growth would look like climbing some invisible ladder, one step of obedience after another until she arrived. But God's whisper told a different story. Spiritual growth was circular, not linear. It was a returning, a constant invitation back to the same voice, the same presence, the same deep love. Now, sitting under the canopy of fading summer, Sarah understood. This was what it meant to walk with God. Not to graduate from one season into the next like a job promotion, but to learn to recognize the patterns of grace, to return to the quiet place again and again, and find Him there, never angry, never distant, never surprised by her weariness. She opened her journal and began to write slowly. Each line felt like a closing prayer to a chapter long written in secret. You never rushed me. You never withdrew. You never measured me by outcomes. You stayed. You waited. You led. And you loved. She paused, tears brimming, not from sadness, but from awe. There had been so many days she thought she was walking alone. So many seasons when fear roared louder than faith. But now she could see it, how God had traced her every step with His whisper. How He had waited in silence, protected in storms, and rejoiced even when she couldn't hear Him. He had never stopped whispering. We just forget how to listen, because the world is so loud, and we are so tired. And doubt loves to masquerade as logic. It tells us that God only speaks when we're spiritual enough, or worse, that He's grown distant because of our failures. But the whisper never leaves. It's not a reward. It's a relationship. And now as Sarah sat in her sacred spot, she knew that the final whisper wasn't really final. It was just the latest. Because God is a companion, not a commentator. He doesn't hand you a map and disappear. He walks beside you, pointing gently, stopping when you stop grieving, when you grieve, celebrating when you dare to hope again. And when you forget, he reminds you. Always gently, always near. That's why in this last chapter of her journey, at least the part she would share, Sarah didn't write about resolutions. She wrote about rhythm. The rhythm of trust, the rhythm of returning, the rhythm of breathing deep and remembering she was never alone. She wrote a letter to herself, one she planned to reread every few months. It read like this: "Dear Sarah, you will forget. That's okay. Just remember to return. Don't chase clarity at the cost of peace. Some answers will come slow, wrapped in silence hidden in ordinary days. And that's okay too. Stop expecting yourself to always feel strong. Strength isn't loud. It's persistent. And you are that even on the days you cry before sunrise. Don't measure your worth by how well you're doing. Measure it by the love that's already yours. Unchanging, unshakable, already given. Walk slowly. People need your presence, not your perfection. Speak when it matters. Listen when it doesn't. And every now and then come back to this bench. Not because it's magical, but because it reminds you of the God who stayed." She signed it with a smiley face the way she used to sign notes in high school. Not out of immaturity, but as a quiet reclaiming of the girl she once tried to outgrow. Sarah had grown, yes, but she hadn't left her younger self behind. She had brought her along redeemed, not erased. God had used every version of her. That was the final whisper she needed, that her journey wasn't about becoming someone else. It was about becoming fully herself. The version God designed all along, before heartbreak twisted her courage, before the world told her who to be. She was never meant to be a performance. She was meant to be a light. And that's what she had become, one soft flame in a world that often feels cold. A light not always seen by many, but felt deeply by those near enough to notice. You could be that light too. Because this story, Sarah's story, isn't unique in its beginning. It started where many stories start, in longing, in doubt, in confusion. What made it sacred was the listening, the turning of the heart again and again toward the whisper. And so the invitation comes now, not to chase after purpose or prove your worth, but to pause, to lean in, to hear again what you may have forgotten. God is still whispering. He has not run out of words. He has not given up on you. He still sees you sitting at your kitchen table wondering if your life matters. He sees the extra shift you took at work, the forgiveness you gave even when it wasn't returned, the prayer you whispered at 3 a.m. with nothing but tears. He saw it all, and he smiled. You don't need to do more to be loved, but love when received deeply will move you into action. Not forced action, not performance, but overflow. That's what Sarah had discovered, and it's what awaits anyone who dares to listen, anyone who trades performance for presence, anyone who gives God even just 1 minute and lets it become a lifetime. So what will you do? Will you return to the whisper? Will you find your bench? Will you believe even now that God has not grown silent and your life is not small? The sky over Brooklyn Hill turned pink as the sun dropped behind the horizon. Sarah stood up from the bench, brushed the leaves off her lap, and whispered one sentence she hadn't said in a long time. I'm ready. Not because she had everything figured out, but because she finally knew who walked beside her. And that whisper, steady and sure, echoed back. So am I. The whisper never leaves, it just waits for your attention. Which closing truth speaks most to your heart today? A. My journey is not about becoming someone else, but becoming fully myself. B. I don't need to be perfect, just present and willing. Comment A or B below your words may help someone find the courage to start listening again. Before you scroll away, pause for one more breath. If something in this message stirred you, if a whisper echoed inside your chest or tears quietly filled your eyes, don't let that moment pass unnoticed. That was more than just words. That was something sacred knocking gently on the door of your heart. You're not alone. You never were. And this journey we walked together, it doesn't have to end here. So take a second, not for me, but for someone else who might need these words just as much as you did. Share this video. Let it reach a heart that's barely holding on. Let it be the whisper someone else is longing to hear. And if this spoke to you, if it reminded you of who you are, or helped you see the light again, drop a comment. Tell us what part reached you, because your voice matters and your story might just be the spark that lights another soul back to life. Let's not keep this to ourselves. Let's be the ones who listen, the ones who stay, the ones who whisper back, "You're not alone." We'll be here right where the whisper meets the soul. Keep coming back. We're walking this together.